to you, everyone, and as Crimean Tatars worldwide and in our places of exile, thank God for America, thank God for President Roosevelt, and thank God for Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who also responded to our letter to help us respond to our appeal. Thank you so very much, and we love everyone here for being here.
Thank you. We have breaking news. The United Nations just voted. 13 countries voted for sanctions. China abstained, and Russia was the sole country voting against sanctions at the United Nations. It's been reported that the Russians are moving towards other cities as we speak today. And I want to identify and congratulate the young people from the Ukrainian American Youth Association that are standing here today. Each one of them is holding a photograph of a hero or heroine that was murdered. Over 100 have been murdered in the Ukraine, 200 are missing, and one was murdered yesterday by Russian forces. So the young people have erected memorials and have carried the pictures with them, and they carry the pictures with them today. And I want to thank the young people for helping us remember how important it is to speak out for the four freedoms and for democracy and independence and freedom for the Ukraine. That concludes our ceremony today. I want to thank everyone who came, everyone who participated. I want to thank the Dobrinsky brothers for their beautiful music, the young people for their memorials they've erected, for the work that they have done. And I want to thank all of our speakers for being here today. And we will be willing to take questions. Are there any questions? Yes.
What should the United States do about the Ukrainian situation? Do you agree with one of the speakers that Ukraine should be admitted in NATO?
The United States has been deeply involved in standing with Crimea. We have voted against their visas. We have initiated sanctions and talked about sanctions that are targeted. And just talking about sanctions, their stock market fell 12 points. The ruble is the lowest it's ever been in history to the dollar, and their interest rates have gone up 2.5%. So economic sanctions and the speaking about economic sanctions has had an impact. We voted in Congress to allocate $1 billion in direct aid, loan guarantees to Crimea without a cap. That was in the House. In the Senate, they voted with reforms for the IMF and for direct aid also, and loan guarantees. So our Secretary of State has been deeply involved every single day, has visited there. And as we speak, 6 senators are flying over to the Ukraine right now to assess the situation and to offer support from the United Nations. Entrance into the EU is decided by the EU. That is a decision by the EU. Personally, would I support it? Yes. But I'm not a decision maker in that capacity. Our country has also called for a reevaluation of the G8 meetings in Sochi. We are calling for no meetings in Sochi and a G7 meeting in the Ukraine, in the beautiful Ukraine. NATO has been standing with us. We have to be united. We are working very hard with our allies. They have said they will follow with sanctions that are the same as America's. It doesn't work if we're not united in this statement. And the EU understands that, and our allies have been standing with us. Any other questions? Okay. Please.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can I ask you what press you're representing? Thank you.
There is a lot of propaganda about what exactly is happening in Crimea and who wants to join with other nations. My name is Andriy Dobryansky. I'm with the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America.
Please spell your name.
ANDRIJ DOBRIANSKY. What everybody should remember about Crimea is that Crimea voted in a national referendum to be a part of Ukraine at Ukraine's independence at the fall of the Soviet Union, and it was an over 70% vote. Just last year, there was a journalist prodded a poll of the Crimean people, and the people who had been pushing for joining with Russia. There's a Unite with Russia party in Crimea that only got 3% of the parliament vote, the local council vote there. The region-wide vote in Crimea was only less than 40%. So there is not a majority of people in Crimea who want to join with Russia. There's not a majority of people in Ukraine that want to join with Russia. We are talking about a new nation, a young nation. What we saw happening at the Maidan and in Kyiv were young people, students, who were born after the fall of the Soviet Union. They do not know of this Soviet Union. They do not care of this history of the Soviet Union. They care about jobs. They care about opportunity, and they are not getting it. They were not getting it under the current regime. So what they started to do was to gather in Kyiv en masse, or in Donetsk, or in Kharkiv, other university cities, and say that we want to join with Europe, we want to join with an opportunity. And after those young children started, then the Afghan veterans from the Soviet wars in Afghanistan said, we need to protect those people. And so they started doing patrols around them. And then you had other groups joining in. You had our Muslim community, our Jewish community joining in. In fact, one of the tents that were running the Maidan was the LGBT community in Ukraine running one of the tents. The feminist groups were joining in. It's a Ukraine-wide, not only ethnically Ukrainian movement that's going on in Ukraine. And what they want is a promise of a future. It's not about Ukraine or Russia, a promise of the future. What I say to Russia is, are you ready? Are you ready to fight for your freedom? Maybe it's time for Russians to stand up. As we saw today in Moscow, 50,000 people marching the streets of Moscow with Ukrainian flags and Russian flags in solidarity with the people of Ukraine and against the invasion of Crimea.
My name is Askold Lozynsky, Askold, Lozynsky, Lozynskyj. I'm from the Organization for the Defense of Four Freedoms for Ukraine. I would like to answer both questions, if you don't mind. The first question on NATO. The U.S. position regarding Ukraine's membership in NATO is very clear. In the year 2008, President George W. Bush was urging his allies in NATO, the European countries, to give Ukraine a membership action plan. The reason it was not given to Ukraine in 2008 is because Russia interfered and threatened to cut off gas to Germany. The big problem in this particular instance was Germany and France. What has transpired in the meantime is that Europe has largely come around. Europe is not as, Europe, but you haven't been as pro-Ukrainian as the United States has been, but you certainly are beginning to recognize the Russian threat. And all of this, the fact that Europe did not accept Ukraine's membership application in 2008, only 2 countries, was due to the fact that they feared Russia cutting off gas. That's precisely the point today. We're talking about freedom from fear. I believe that Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Hollande in France are coming around. And frankly, if the United States, as the leading member of NATO, were to initiate discussions now, I am certain that other countries, there are 28 members of NATO, such countries as Poland, the Czech Republic, and even Germany and France would come around. On the other question, which is a very interesting one, you know, it's possible to manipulate geographic locations in different ways. I will be so bold as to say that Ukraine is not, it may be entitled to Crimea because of the OSCE Helsinki Accords. But at the same time, if we go back to history, Crimea is Crimean Tatar territory. The fact of the matter is that it belonged neither to Russia nor to Ukraine. It became a part of Russia because the Tsarist Empire grabbed it. And Stalin, in 1944, deported the Crimean Tatars. And the reason why there's a Russian majority in Crimea is because he artificially planted Russian colonists in Crimea. I received, in fact, this morning, I'll be brief, a very interesting proposal from Ukrainian organizations in Lower Siberia, in Chumenska Oblast. That's the famous oblast that has all of the natural gas in Siberia. 62% of that region, that oblast, is Ukrainian by ethnicity. They declared, probably as a joke or as a ruse, that they wish to secede from Russia and join Ukraine. But Ukrainian forces aren't going to march on Tyumen and grab Tyumen and make it a part of Ukraine, because we believe in territorial integrity and we believe in the inviolability of borders. The Crimean Tatars, who are the indigenous peoples of Crimea, have been unequivocal in their position. They wish to be a part of Ukraine. I think that speaks for itself.
All of the speakers. Another item that was discussed in Congress this week on the Ukraine, an alleged $88 billion is missing from the prior corrupt government. And our Treasury Department and other professionals are trying to track where that money is and if we can get it returned rightfully to the Ukrainian people. So we are working on a lot of fronts, and I just want to thank the young people. I think that they are really an inspiration for our future. I want to thank all of you for coming, because the story of the suffering of the people will not get out unless you are the ones who get it out, and we want to thank you for being here. Thank you very much for coming. And I really want to thank the park, Sally Menard and the Four Freedoms Park, for reminding us with this beautiful park of the four freedoms that everyone in the world wants. Freedoms that we take for granted. Freedoms that may be taken away from the Tartars and the Ukrainians by this illegal invasion of their land. So I thank everyone for coming, and I want to note that the United Nations is right behind us. There's a beautiful photograph of the United Nations where this historic vote took place. 13 countries voting for sanctions. That shows a united world. Russia voting against, China abstaining. Thank you very much.